the global news front on the geopolitics side, day 20. Still no respite between the Israel-Hamas war. Israeli tanks in Gaza made an overnight raid in Gaza before withdrawing in what it called the biggest incursion of the current war. The war so far has claimed over 7,000 Palestinian lives since the war began, and the UN General Assembly begins an emergency meeting in Gaza with a vote on the Jordanian draft resolution, which is expected today.
Meanwhile, the foreign ministers of the United Arab Emirates, Jordan, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, Oman, Qatar, Kuwait, Egypt and Morocco have condemned targeting of civilians and violation of international law in Gaza, which has been under Israeli bombardment. And in a joint statement, they mentioned that the right to self-defense does not justify breaking law and neglecting the rights of Palestinians.
Right, China state media has reported that former Premier Li Keqiang has died of a sudden heart attack at the age of 68. The former Chinese Premier and head of China's cabinet served under President Xi Jinping for a decade from 2013. Li ended a 2-year term as Premier in March.
Well, shifting focus to the US then, and what could make the Fed's job more difficult, the US economy showed strength in the third quarter as GDP expanded an annualized 4.9%, the most since the last quarter of 2021, above market forecast of 4.3% and a 2.1% expansion in the second quarter. Consumer spending rose 4%, the most since quarter 4 of 2021, led by consumption of housing and utilities and healthcare.
Right, and the other piece which was in news was the European Central Bank opted to maintain its record high interest rates at 4%, putting a halt to the 10 consecutive hikes that began in July of 2022. Decision comes amid concerns of persistent inflation, but the ECB acknowledged a recent slowdown with regard to inflation. This move reflects a delicate balancing act between combating inflation and addressing sluggish economic growth. Listen in to what Christine Lagarde had to say on this front.
Inflation dropped to 4.3% in September, almost a full percentage point lower than its August level. In the near term, it is likely to come down further as the sharp price increases in energy and food recorded in autumn 2022 will drop out of the yearly rates. September's decline was broad-based. Food price inflation slowed again, although it remains high by historical standards. In annual terms, energy prices fell by 4.6%, but most recently have risen again and become less predictable in view of the new geopolitical tensions. The risks to economic growth remain tilted to the downside. Growth could be lower if effects of monetary policy turn out stronger than expected. A weaker world economy would also weigh on growth. Russia's unjustified war against Ukraine and the tragic conflict triggered by the terrorist attacks on Israel are key sources of geopolitical risk.
All right, that's the word coming in from Christine Lagarde of ECB. But let's get a move on then and talk about numbers, because tech giant Amazon and Intel both saw an earnings beat for the third quarter. Robust sales in its retail unit and significant cost cuts aided Amazon's performance. But the company's cloud revenue is the department that missed street estimates. However, Amazon believes AI is the future of cloud. Similarly, Intel also beat Q3 expectations and shared a strong revenue growth guidance for the first time since 2020.
Right, rising tensions between the US and China could slow down the global supply chain. That's the warning coming in from the TSMC founder Morris Chang. The comments come just a few weeks after the US doubled down on AI import curbs from China. Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company is one of the biggest semiconductor makers in the world. It looks like countries are mad at each other. That worries me, he added.
Shifting focus then, former lawmaker Maria Corina Machado is formally declared as the victor of the Venezuelan opposition's weekend presidential primary. Meanwhile, in a shocking shift, Argentina's Sergio Massa took 37% of the vote of the presidential elections, forcing a runoff against outsider against Javier Milei.